And I listen. This is you would love this, and hopefully, when you get to Moscow, you and I are going to spend some time together, and maybe we can meet people like this. And I know you love it because you're kind of like one of those intellectual types, even though you don't dress the part. I just had a conversation with Sergei Sanakoyev. Right, this is the guy who forecasts the Asian Pacific relationship with Russia. He's been doing this like all of these guys over here. They've been doing this for 30, 40 years, this guy. He just came on my set and he took me through everything going on between China and Putin and Xi. One of the first things you would have loved this. One of the first things I asked him was, why did China and Russia hate each other so much? And he goes, oh, China hated Russia. And I said, why did China hate Russia? He said they couldn't stand Khrushchev. They didn't like Khrushchev. So they liked Stalin, but they didn't like Khrushchev. And then they also got mad, he told me. They got mad in 1991 when Russia collapsed and the Russians just gave up on all socialist principles. It's not like they didn't understand why they were doing it, but it's like they saw them as quitters. It's really cool. He took me through this explanation, but then I asked him the money question for Scott Ritter. I said, so tell me something. Is Mr. Putin in China talking to Mr. Xi about Ukraine and explaining to him what Russia will soon need to do in Ukraine? And he goes, well, I can't give you specifics because I said, come on, nobody's watching. He laughed. and then he said, look, Rick, yes, everything that Russia has done in Ukraine, China knows about, and often before it happens. Yeah. They have been like this, as thick as thieves throughout this entire thing. And there is much that Russia has been able to do because of China in Ukraine. I said, really? And I said, then I asked him this. I said, with whatever Mr. Putin just told him that they're about to do in Ukraine, which I know you can't tell me, but is Mr. Xi in on it, Scott? Is he in on it? And does he understand? And is he okay with it? Is he going along? Is he cool with it? He said 100%. Yeah. Absolutely. I can guarantee you that there was a discussion. They know what's going on, and Mr. Xi gets it and is okay with it. What do you think of that?
No, I agree with that 100%. Again, who knows what happens behind closed doors? Let me give you my feeling about what didn't happen. Mm-hmm. What didn't happen is that Vladimir Putin didn't sit down with Xi Jinping and pull out the war map and say, all right, boss, on Thursday, we're going to do this. Friday, we're going to move things around. We're going to be doing this and the other thing. This is the attack. These are the objectives. They didn't have that conversation at all because they don't need to. Yeah. That's Russia's business. That's the sovereign business. Just like Xi Jinping wouldn't call up Vladimir Putin and say, tomorrow we're launching 3 corps of amphibious troops against Taiwan. We're going to be doing that and the other. No. All they have to know is that from Chinese perspective, Taiwan is of existential importance to it. The integrity of China is premised on one China. Taiwan is China. And Russia says, we support you 100% on that. We support the sovereign notion of one China. And whatever you have to do to make that happen and to oppose those who seek to leverage Taiwan away from you, we're here to help you. 100%. What do you need? You need energy security? We'll build a damn pipeline. You need this? We'll do that. We're here for you. And that's the kind of relationship. And I believe China, first of all, China, and having the meeting with Trump, Xi Jinping was sending every signal possible to the United States and to Russia that the thing we're talking to you about Taiwan, where we said direct confrontation, if you dare impinge on our sovereign rights over Taiwan. It's not just confrontation. We will confront you. It will be a war. Those words are words that are being sent to Vladimir Putin, saying that whatever stance you take regarding Ukraine, to include direct confrontation with those who seek to leverage Ukraine in a way that's harmful to Russia, we will support you. We are with you there. And they proved it by on the eve of this conflict, which is going to happen, I believe. I think we're going to be looking at an expansion of this conflict into Europe in a very dramatic fashion. But
you mean Russia having to do something to Europe because of what Europe is doing to them?
Europe is at war with Russia right now. They are.
By the way, I saw it with my own eyes. I was at the place where I play golf this weekend, Pestivo, wonderful place, and all the guys there. A lot of the guys are golfers and business guys, and yeah, typical people go out and play golf on weekends. They were so pissed off, Scott, all weekend long in Moscow. My assistant, Marie, who you've talked to on the phone, she said, I couldn't sleep last night. I said, why? She goes, babies were screaming, bombs were going off, explosions. They got hit by 1,000 or so drones, and the Russia's anti-ballistic defense system went operational, and suddenly all over Moscow. Well, that's not true. Not all over Moscow. It was a northern part of Moscow where this happened. All the people who live in that region were talking about it the next day, and people are angry and putting pressure on the government to say, God.
Yeah. And that's a reality people need to understand. You're not going to create. The United States thought they could come in and create some sort of, engagement with China that would get China linked to America to push China away from. There's still people in America that believe that is possible. People who, I guess, are going off the Kissinger approach back in the night. That isn't going to happen. But the proof that isn't going to happen is the agreements that were signed here are in depth and long lasting. These aren't relationships of convenience. This isn't me asking a girl out for a date on Friday night. This is, first of all, I'm married, so I wouldn't do that. Hypothetical, I don't want to get in trouble here. But this is a marriage proposal. This is, hey, we've got a long-term relationship here. We're building for the future. We're ready. We understand relationships have their ups and downs and problems. We're building a framework of cooperation that can survive any fluctuation in the situation. And that's the kind. And if you saw it, you pointed out. Look at the guy's walk. Compare his walk to the airplane with Donald Trump's walk to the airplane. You got one frumpy old man who is defeated, and you have this other guy going, "I just kicked some serious ass." I know. I'm going on. Yeah. So, but now we come to and
they just put out. By the way, they just put out a memorandum. I don't know if you've seen this yet. I mean, I'm privy to all this stuff because it's coming into me from. I got like all these people on my team who are handing me stuff, but they just put out a memorandum, basically saying a joint memorandum signed by Xi and Mr. Putin, basically saying we are here to kind of defeat the hegemony. And the hegemony will no longer be allowed to do the things they're doing around the world. And that's essentially why they're staying together. That's what they're saying.
And the hegemony is America. Wow. And Xi Jinping shook the hands. I mean, it was an amazing, when he came down, first of all, he's shaking the hands of Donald Trump, who doesn't respect him. Donald Trump doesn't respect Xi Jinping. Donald Trump doesn't respect anybody. And I'll say this for the Russian audience, too. I mean, I know there's people in senior levels. This is why I probably won't get interviews with the people that I'd like to get interviews, people you interview, because I'm going to say the following. You can't have your foreign minister say the truth about America being agreement incapable, which is an accurate assessment of the reality of the situation, and then turn around and invite Steve Witkoff back to the Kremlin and expect to have any credibility. All right? The reason why America is agreement incapable is because people like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who aren't serious, who aren't friends of Russia, who aren't looking out for the best interest of Russia, who view Alaska not as an opportunity for peace, but an opportunity for America to continue policies of exploitation. We have not entered into a single agreement with Russia where we have carried it out in good faith. Ever since New START, and you can talk to Anatoly Antonov, he's at Ingimo right now, call him up. And interview him and ask him about how he was lied to by Rose Gottemiller about ballistic missile defense. Ask Dmitry Medvedev, who's also in Russia, you should talk to him and ask him about the conversation he had with Barack Obama about just let the election come. And then after that, I'll do that. Ask about the compromises Russia made on the belief the United States would put ballistic missiles on the table to deal with the serious strategic implications of pulling out of the ABM treaty. And the Russians will all come back and say, we were lied to. Because America lies to Russia. We cannot be trusted at all. Zero. There is no future in believing there's going to be effective diplomatic interaction with the United States. And so long as the Russian government continues to behave as if there is some potential, and I know why they do for diplomatic purposes, but maybe it's time to call a spade, because all you're doing is empowering the people in the United States who continue to tell the president, we own the Russians. We'll just send Steve Witkoff. They'll sit down and talk to the Russian president, and we own them. We'll continue this. Well, they don't own anything, but it creates a perception that shapes policy and has implications. And one of those implications is instead of telling the Ukrainians to stand down, We continue to create the impression on Ukraine that if they just continue their long-range sanctions, a little bit more pain to Russia, then it can happen. And how does Russia respond? Inviting Steve Witkoff, which now has allowed the MI6 guys who control the Financial Times, who put out the ridiculous story about Xi Jinping telling Donald Trump that Vladimir Putin's lost the war. They will continue to put stupid stories out there. And, this is the reality. The United States is agreement incapable. Russia will not get any agreement from the United States. How does Russia deal with that? Here's my solution. Rick, you guys just had like 30-degree weather in Russia. I heard Moscow hot. But a week prior to that, you had rain and you had to wear a sweater.
Yeah, and there was still some snow on the ground.
Yeah. Do you negotiate with the weather?
No.
Do you sit down and say, hey, weather, tomorrow I want to play golf. I'll tell you what, I'll give you this and that and the other thing for a sunny day. Can you negotiate with the weather? And the answer is no. The weather does what the weather does. All you can do is be prepared. So when it rains, you put on a raincoat. When it snows, you put on fur, shovel snow. Right now, Russia, to deal with the United States, you have to view the United States not as a negotiating partner, but as the kind of unpredictable actor as the weather. And the weather can be destructive. The weather can be beneficial. You just don't know which way the wind blows. You don't need to be a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. Bob Dylan. But the point is, that's how Russia has to deal with the United States. Russia has to create its own realities.
But deep down, these Russians want to be friends with. You've been here. I'm treated here so nicely. People go out of their way because I'm American to be nice to me.
But there's a difference between the government and the people.
Yeah.
Okay. And here's the thing too. And this is the point.
But there's a pro-American spirit in this country.
There should be
more than Europe.
But there should be, because I'll tell you why. Americans are good people. Rick, you are a walking, talking ambassador of how good Americans are. I mean, I've seen you in there. Look, you're like me. Look, we smile everywhere we go, and I'm absolutely certain when the Russians look at me, they say he's an idiot because all he does is smile. But I smile because I'm genuinely happy, and I really do like meeting people, and I get real visceral enjoyment out of meeting the Russian people. And when I smile, it's as genuine as the day is long, just like you. The Russians have a different history, and they take approach. Once you get past the stern, stoic exterior of the Russians, they're as warm and human as anybody. But they don't come at you smiling like an idiot. They come at you looking like, and hey, how you doing? Why do you ask? Do you really want to know? This sort of thing. But the point is, Americans are good people. We're fundamentally good people. We want to do the right thing. Our system needs fixed. And one of the key aspects to fix it regarding Russia is we have to cure the disease of Russophobia. Russophobia infects the totality of American society, all the way from the top on down. At the top, it's the worst. As it focuses down, though, the people only know what they hear. The average American isn't a scholar of Russian history or Russian culture. What they know is what they hear. And so this is why what we're doing is so important, because by you doing what you're doing, my God, Rick, you just said this show that you have 30 million people watched. That's 30 million doses of antidote, because an American is telling the truth about Russia. That's important. I don't quite have the same reach, but I go to Russia. I try to capture Russian reality, bring it back to the United States, and deliver an antidote person to person. When I first came, I do these challenge coins, that I come to Russia. I've given you a couple. I don't know. It's just sort of a Marine thing. I hope the Russian people understand. It's meant in good faith. But the first one I did was, to send the signal of one handshake at a time, meaning that I'm not a diplomat where I can speak for the United States. I'm an American citizen, but I am going to engage in people-to-people diplomacy, one handshake at a time. I'm going to meet you. I'm going to shake your hand. And I'm old school American, where a handshake is a bond. It's a contract. And when I shake your hand in the hand of friendship, you're getting a real friendship here. And I want to be able to do that, so we get more people to do that, so that we can inoculate as many Americans as possible to create the potential of policy change. And that's where the Russians need to focus on. Again, right now with Donald Trump, and it's not just Trump, they were agreement incapable under Joe Biden. They were agreement incapable under first Trump, agreement incapable under Obama, agreement incapable under Bush. We lie, we cheat, we steal as a government. Russia has been the enemy, the boogeyman, and will continue to be so going forward. The American people, however, are good people. So the efforts of the Russians, while you can sit there and say the government is agreement incapable, the American people, you just need to be friendly with us and give us
Yes.
an opportunity to learn about you. The more we learn about the Russian people, the more we learn to love the Russian people. I mean, again, I'm in love with Russia. I should admit it. My wife's going to be very, very upset.
Yeah.
But Russia is a mistress to me. And what I mean by that is I want to continuously visit Russia. There's so much I want to learn about Russia. I want to get into. I just received a very kind invitation to go to Ufa in Bashkiria. I've been studying Bashkir history my entire. Zeki Validi Togan is a Bashkir scholar, and I'm sitting there going, my God, I can go to Bashkiria now. I can't this time, but I'm going to go. I get to go to Ufa and see it, and I mean, what that does to my heart, that's like, I'm going to go visit, a lover, somebody I love, something I want to. I mean, it's amazing. And that's how I view Russia, is this wonderful land of intellectual and emotional opportunity. And the funny thing is, when I say this to the average American that hasn't been to Russia, they're like, yeah. Once they go, though, Russia's a drug. It's a narcotic. And you go there. All you have to do, though, is drop the pretense. Drop the pretense. You don't have to impress the Russians. They're not an impression game. Just be who you are. Just be a human being, and you've already impressed them. The thing about the Russians, again, I get in trouble when I speak of Russia, but they've been disrespected so long by so many that I think there's this automatic assumption that foreigners come in and there's like a defense mechanism coming up.
Of course, yeah.
And so they put it up there. But the moment you go, hey, how you doing? Not, hey, I'm an American. I do things bigger and better than you. So how are you? But you come in and go, wow, this is cool. How you doing?
Wham. You know what I think, Scott? The more time I spend here, and obviously I'm here every day, and all I do is hang out with, I think, some wonderful people, and it's also some not so good people. It's like don't play. It's like everything else, right? There's good people.
Be assholes, just like
of course. But I get a sense that they are where we were. I don't know, 50s, 60s, something like that, 70s, maybe, or maybe even. Russians are just understanding what the spirit of capitalism is, what the spirit of being able to engage. They're in the malls. They're sharing products. They're into commerce, and it's all still kind of new to them, and they're having fun with it.
That's an economic aspect of it, though.
Yes.
But I think the comparison that works, and you brought it up. You talked about the Sino experts. And they said, the Chinese were mad at Russia in 1991, 1992 because Russians gave up.
Yeah.
And that's just an obvious statement of fact. And I've said I never got mad at the Russians, but I felt sorry for Russia because, look, I learned about Russia when it was the Soviet Union, and they were my enemy. But to defeat your enemy, you have to know your enemy.
Yeah, mine too. I'm Cuban. You can only imagine.
And I had to study and study and study. So I got deep respect for Russia. And when I met with Russians in Votkinsk and elsewhere, I saw people who were proud of who they were. And what happened with the collapse of the Soviet Union is that Russians stopped being proud of who they were. They fell out of love with themselves. They started to have this doubt. They started to look to the West for alternatives to a failed society.
The 90s were horrible here. People tell stories of murders, and it was a crime.
The devastation was crazy. But the beauty, again, I say this and everybody goes, you're Putin's puppet. Well, screw you. No, I'm just a historian. Vladimir Putin took the reins from a failed leader, Boris Yeltsin, and a failed nation, the Russian Federation, which was on the verge of total collapse.
It was.
In 25 years, the reversal he's done is, Russia is an amazing place today. They're on their feet. The Russian people love their country. And this is where I make the comparison with Americans, because 25 years, a quarter of a century, the Russian people today are so very proud of who they are. Yes, there's the economic aspect of it. There's a success, but I'm talking about the human aspect of it. Who are the Russian people? And the Russian people today meet you with an even gaze, not a superior gaze, but an even gaze, because they're like, we take second place to nobody. We're not saying we're better than you, but we're not going to let you say you're better than we are.
They're like satisfied, right? It's
100%.
like Putin. I know people are going to get mad when I say this, but the guy's got 80% approval in this country. And it's not a Russian poll. That's a German poll. And the Germans hate the Russians.
There's a reason, because he's done so much good for Russia. But now we come to the United States. we suffered. The Great Depression came in, the collapse of Wall Street, people jumping off of roofs. You go read John Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath. And you see what America went through in the late 20s and the early 30s. There's a reason why Franklin Delano Roosevelt had to, create the construction corps to rebuild America, to bring in hope. But the Second World War came in and we jumped up. That's why I think your comparison to the 50s. Americans in the 1950s were proud of being American. Yeah. They said, we survived the Great Depression. We helped win a world war. Our industry was indispensable in this. And we are proud of who we are. And we think we're good people. And Americans traveled back then, and the world loved Americans. I
love where you're going with this. You're saying the Russians, because they got through the 90s. Damn it, we got through that horrible crap.
It's like what we did. And they love themselves now. They built who they are on a foundation of sacrifice and sorrow. And Americans built who we are. And so my warning to the Russians is, however, look where America is today. If you don't respect this moment, and you don't abuse the pride you feel. You feel pride because you did something that was great. Continue to do great things, not at the expense of others. Do great things to the benefit of your own people to sustain this moment. America lost track. We had the American dream, but then we got involved in Vietnam. Then we got involved in these other things. And now we can transition. Russia has to make sure that Ukraine isn't its Vietnam. Okay. This Ukraine war has to come to an end. It can't drag on forever.
But let me ask you this though, and I've heard you talk about this, so I'm kind of feeding you this. If it's really the Europeans who are providing the weapons, who are providing the funding, who are providing the intel, who are providing the components, who are providing the guidance, are the Russians really at war with Ukraine, or are they really at war with Europe right now?
No, they're at war with Russia's called it out all along. I mean, early on in the war, when again, I think Vladimir, he's done a couple amazing things with speeches. A couple years ago, he produced the Istanbul Communique, because nobody understood that there was actually a peace treaty. Yeah. They were ready to rock. They were just told that Boris Yeltsin came in and said, yeah, this isn't going to work. But not Boris Yeltsin, Boris Johnson. But Putin went, hey, guys, it wasn't just simple, negotiations aren't working. We had an agreement signed, ready to go. But now it gets even further. Emmanuel Macron called and said, Ukraine can't agree to this agreement with a pistol to their head. Russia voluntarily withdrew. Russia did everything to try and create peace. That's when it was a Ukraine versus Russia thing. When the West killed the Istanbul Communique, when the United States passed new Lend-Lease, $50 billion, when NATO began retraining a new Ukrainian army and re-equipping it to continue the war, that's when the war became a war between Russia and the collective West. And the Russians recognized it. But the genius of Vladimir Putin is he always stayed focused on what Russia's objectives were. The objective was never to defeat Europe. The objective was actually never to occupy Ukraine. The objective was to bring stability and peace and prosperity to the Russian people of the afflicted regions, of the Donbass.
Zaporizhia and
not even Zaporizhia and Kherson, because Zaporizhia and Kherson, up until the referendum, Russia would, if the Istanbul Communique had been signed, Zaporizhia and Kherson would be Ukraine today. Russia had no territorial.
That's actually a great point. It's really worked against them. So what do you think? Happened? Let me get to the money part of this, because we're going to be running out of time in this segment pretty soon. But what do you think Mr. Putin told Mr. Xi that he's going to have to do in the coming months or whenever it is? What will Russia's move be now to try and finally put this, as Mr. Putin recently said, the war will be coming to an end soon?
Well, I think he pretty much said that. Real quick, after the dissolution of the Istanbul Communique, Putin stayed on course. And what he did is he managed all of the gross violations because Europe was a party to the conflict. The United States was a party to the conflict, but Russia never expanded the conflict because they wanted to keep conflict under control. The other thing is the Ukrainians were trying to provoke Russia into doing something precipitous that would give NATO the ability to come in. Vladimir Putin and the Russian leadership, we never forget there is a Russian leadership. This isn't a dictatorship. The Russian leadership made the wise decision that Europe will defeat itself and Ukraine will be ground down and America will lose political interest and the war will be resolved this way over time. That's why they never talked about a calendar. But the problem is the West has crossed the last line. Sergei Karaganov in 2023 wrote a paper where he talked about, because Europe has declared war on Russia and they said it's strategic defeat of Russia and we're seeking to implement the strategic defeat of Russia, that Russia couldn't be passive and had to respond. And he said, it's time for Russia to use nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons preemptively. Yeah. And he wrote a paper, said, America won't be willing to trade Boston for Poland, so Russia will get away with it. Vladimir Putin at the time specifically said, no, that's not who we are. That's not what we are. That's not what we are. But then in 2024.
Karaganov is a hawk and Putin is kind of a dove.
He is. But then in 2024, because of people like the ones you play golf with are saying, hey, we got issues here because stuff's happening. Vladimir Putin, because he's not a dictator, brought Karaganov in to help guide Russia's to reshape strategic deterrence. In 2025, Russia published a new nuclear doctrine. It said if nuclear powers, the United States, NATO, use conventional weapons and supply it to a non-nuclear power who then uses that conventional capacity to strike the strategic depth of Russia, Russia is allowed to use nuclear weapons in response. That's the Karaganov influence. What happened now today is that the United States and Europe, primarily Europe, has given Ukraine the capacity through long-range drones, intelligence, etc., to strike the strategic depth of Russia. This is an unsustainable point. This is a different kind of war than happened before. They're not winning this war, Ukraine, but what they're doing is they've changed the paradigm so that if this continues unabated, real harm will come to Russia. Yeah. And so Vladimir Putin told Xi Jinping that this cannot continue. We will have to take actions to stop this. And I believe they will. I believe, again, I don't want to predict the future, but I do believe that decision-making centers are terms that the Russians use often. I believe decision-making centers in Ukraine will be hit decisively. And I believe decision-making centers in at least one European country will be hit. And Russia has identified that country and the decision-making centers. So I believe in the near future, and we've got a big thing coming up. We're going to a city, the second city of Russia. Some people say it's the first city of Russia.
St. Petersburg. Oh God, my wife. She was like, I was just talking to Tucker about this the other day, and he told me I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, and I can't wait to go there. So my wife loves it. My wife is like, St. Petersburg is the most beautiful city you've ever taken.
And Ukraine's going to be firing drones there. And you think Russia's going to let them disrupt the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum? Drones fired out of Latvia. So yeah. I think the situation has defined itself, and I think the solution is obvious. And I think that Vladimir Putin educated Xi Jinping on the necessity of that. And Xi Jinping didn't have to say yes to Putin, although I'm sure he did. All he had to do is point to the conversations he had with Donald Trump about Taiwan and tell Vladimir Putin, Ukraine is to you what Taiwan is to us. You need to do what you need to do, and we support you 100%.
Yeah, I think there is a real similarity there. And I do get a sense because there's so many planes that are not, it's just a pain in the ass. You're going to get on a plane and go on vacation with your family to Istanbul, and they tell you, sorry, the plane can't take off tonight because there's too many drones in the air. This happens all the time in Russia. You can't sleep at night because there's drone. It's not like it's crazy. It's not like, trust me, I'm not trying to say that if you live in Moscow, you feel like you're in a war zone, because it's not. But it's just an inconvenience, and you kind of know it's there, and you start feeling like, this is kind of something that we got to.
That's like a lullaby music. Pop, pop, pop. Oh, yeah, baby, I'm going to sleep.
Because you're such a Marine. but so let me just get a full understanding of what you're saying. You think there's a real possibility that Russia's going to have to hit, and what was the word you used? Center? Center?
Decision-making centers.
Decision-making. What is it? What is that? What do you mean by that? Well, what would they hit in Ukraine? Like hit Kiev?
Bankova, the presidential administration, the parliament, the intelligence centers, basically the center of government would be struck and decisively and eliminated. And I think that's the first step, because if Ukraine relocated to Lvov, for instance, but continued the same policies, then Russia would have to do what it has to do. But I think by striking decisively, and I think, again, you look at it's not me saying this. Russia sent a signal 5 times before the Victory Day parade on what the consequences would be, and educated everybody about that. I don't think Russia goes out there and says, I learned this from Russian ambassadors early on, especially when I was working as an arms control person, and then later in the United Nations. Words have meaning. Every word matters. No words are spoken lightly. When the Russian government commits to something, the statement that is made is crafted by people who are IMGIMO trained. These are experts in the language of diplomacy, the language of national security.
Right.
So when they tell the West, we are going to take out the decision-making center of Kiev, they mean just that. It's not.
Yeah, it's not. It's not chest thumping. It's not something Steve Witkoff thought of on the plane with a scotch.
A decision has been made. A decision has been made. And all they need now is the conditions for implementation of it. And now they've used the same language in Latvia. Decision-making centers affiliated with the launching of drones against Russia. These are military targets, command and control targets, etc. And I believe Russia, again, Narishkin is a man I respect. And Narishkin is the head of the SVR. He isn't going to come out and say these things because he's making it up. He's going to say it because they have hard facts. Again, remember the drone, the chip that the Russians gave the American air attaché? Why did they do that? Because they knew it was on that chip. They knew by giving it, the Americans reverse engineering would go, they can see that we were trying to hit this target, and the intelligence came from this source. I forget where we were going on this, but
sorry, but I don't know what happened. It was I think because our time ran out or something, because we had this.
We're almost.
I told Artie, I said, let's go over, because I love talking to Scott, so we can go over by a few minutes here. But there's something I got to share with you that I've experienced here. So, because you mentioned something about Witkoff and Jared Kushner and all these guys who travel with Trump, and God bless them, I'm sure they're all nice people. But compared to the people in Russia and in China, like this guy I just interviewed a little while ago, before I interview these people in Russia, I always look at the curriculum vitae. Oh my God, Scott. They're experts to the nth degree in whatever they do. Like if I ask my staff to find me the guy in Russia who's in charge of eyeglasses, only because I will go to his curriculum today and I will find out that this guy has been either investigating, making, running eyeglass companies for the last 40 years. They're like,
he invented eyeglasses.
This guy, Sergei Saragoyev, that I just interviewed, who's the premier expert in Russia on Sino relations. I asked him this. I said, "You've been doing this since like the 1980s or something. This is," and he's gone up the ladder of, and he meets with Putin, and he met with the other presidents of Russia in the past. It's not like they just found some guy and threw him in a job. No. These guys are so incredibly disciplined and steady.
When Russians use the term expert, they mean it. They don't use it lightly. There was a book written in the United States called The Outliers. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not, no.
It was popular.
No, I know the principle, obviously.
Yeah, but basically, to be an expert, you need to put in 10,000 hours. For instance, the Beatles. How did the Beatles become the Beatles? Because they played 10,000 hours of concerts in Hamburg. How did Bill Gates become an expert? Because he spent 10,000 hours in the garage of his mother building computers and all that. So when people come to me and go, Scott, you're an expert. I'm like, no. I'm a specialist in many things. I have an interest. I have a curiosity. But
nuclear stuff. You're an expert.
I'm an expert in two things I will claim expertise in. One will be on-site inspections. There's nobody that knows on-site inspections better than me, because I wrote the book and I implemented it in the most difficult circumstances possible. I know it inside and out. I know everything.
On weaponry and nukes, specifically.
On weapons of mass destruction, right. But on treaty implementation, compliance verification, I'm an expert in this. I'll take that. And the other one will be, to be honest, firefighting. I was a volunteer firefighter for a dozen years, and I went to every training course in the world. I fought every kind of fire imaginable, from forest fires to house fires to chemical fires to oil fires. And I put in about 50,000 hours worth of training to this. So I'm good at firefighting, and I'm good at on-site inspection. I'm an expert. Everything else, I have have an intellectual curiosity. I have a specialty. I can speak intelligently about it, but I'm not an expert. You know who scares the hell out of me? Maria Zakharova. Wonder why? Because she speaks Chinese and her father is a Chinese expert. I mean, that's the thing about Russians. There's just nothing superficial about them at all. In America, they'll use that term expert, and there's a superficiality like you wouldn't believe. They're not an expert. You know that the moment you engage with them, you go, you're not an expert.
I was talking to Lavrov recently, and he said to me, Reek, these people, they're not serious. They're not serious. He keeps saying that. And I know exactly what he means. It's like he doesn't want to come out and be so rude to say, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. But when he says they're not serious, it's like when he told me about it, he said, we went to Alaska. We had a deal. We shook hands. We thought we were ready to move forward. And then the next thing, there's no deal. So I'm just thinking, these people, they're not serious. How do you talk to people who are not serious? And I'm thinking, how do you
the Russians taught me
talk to a Witkoff,
an interesting word. When I first heard it, I was sort of insulted because I'd given a presentation and I poured my heart into it. And it was about a topic that I consider myself to be an expert in, arms control. And afterwards, a Russian came up and I said, well, because I'm a human being, just like everybody else. How'd I do? Did I do okay?
You're so insecure.
I am so insecure. And he said, "Oh, well, Mr. Scott, you were adequate." And I was like, "Adequate? What do you mean adequate? What do you mean adequate?" And then later on, someone said, "That's sort of like one of the greatest compliments that can be given. It means you
did your job.
You did your job. You know what you're doing." Because the Russians don't play around. There's no superficiality. You either know your job or you don't know your job. And what you've pointed out is, unfortunately, in the United States today, we don't have anybody who knows Russia. When I was doing arms control, we had people who studied Russia. We had foreign area officers who were
yes.
And you're not allowed to study. My daughter, for having the audacity as a Southern Caucasian specialist to travel to Chechnya with me and meet with Ramzan Kadyrov and all that, they tried to kick her out of Georgetown University. Her fellow students encouraged her to commit suicide, and they tried to disgrace her because she had the audacity to say, I want to know more about the topic I'm supposed to be an expert in. And that's the problem with America. You can't be a Russian expert today because they literally won't allow you to be a Russian expert. If you try to accumulate a certain amount of expertise, you're called Putin's puppet. You're called a tool of Russia. You're called any other thing. Yeah.
I learned from my dad when I was a kid, man. My dad always said this to me about anything you build or anything you care about. He always said, son, without a foundation, your house will fall. It's never forget those words. It was like, you have to be foundational in life to get results. The Chinese-Russia relationship is what it is today because it's foundational.
No,
they
you're
have
right.
spent years building this damn thing,
No,
you don't just pick a guy like Witkoff off the street because you play golf and he's your real estate buddy and say, hey, go over there and do a deal. With all due respect to Witkoff, I'm sure he's a wonderful guy and I'd love to have a beer with him, but he's not going to know what the hell he's doing. I
remember when I was in Iraq, I had designed this inspection to go after Iraq's fuel production capabilities. And I had designed it, but I was considered to be the expert on Iraqi missile fuels. I don't know anything about missile fuel, nothing. But I knew how to spell it. That's about it. But we brought in a Russian team of guys who were real experts. They brought in their little lab. And so I'm sitting down having the organizational meeting with these guys. They're like, so Scott, the TGO2, the chemical compound, what's your feeling on it? I said, what? Huh? And I realized that do not sit down with a Russian expert and pretend you're an expert, because they will instantaneously know that you know nothing. Don't sit down with a Russian diplomat and try and talk about an assigned topic unless you have your act together, because they will expose you as a fraud, not because they want to expose you as a fraud, but because their depth of knowledge is so comprehensive. The foundation of knowledge upon which they are building their position is beyond.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not just the Russian. I find that with the Chinese when I traveled over there.
You've had the benefit.
It's just a different. I think we Westerners have gotten a little full of ourselves and pretend that we can kind of pretend our way through things, and I think that's.
What do you think?
Something we got to improve upon.
The dot-com bubble was. The dot-com bubble was about idiots sitting down at a bar with a napkin, designing a website, putting an IPO out, making a lot of money. They didn't do anything. They don't understand anything. We build industries today. The way Wall Street works right now is not on building a factory that produces something, but on creating concepts of derivatives.
Money. Yes. Yeah, it's a money game. It's all
build nothing. It's all fake. Whereas in Russia, they build things. Again, they're experts. Your glass guy, he not only has, developed the alloy for this, he ground the glass for this. He understands. And he did it all when he was 15.
I've been going since 6 o'clock this morning, so we better wrap this thing up. We're already like 15 minutes over. RTM over there, who I call Artie, is looking at me like, hey, what the hell's going on? I thought this thing was over. Oh, God, yeah. It's always fun making American names for Russians, using their Russian names. They love me for that. Hey, dude, love you. I'll be seeing you at SPIEF very soon. And, it's going to be a really great event this year. And a lot, I expect to learn a lot of things there. I'm going to be doing all my shows. I think I'm getting in on I'm getting in on Tuesday. I'm going to be there through Saturday for that golf tournament that I invited to that you're not going to play in. So
now, a lesson in the future, I'll start practicing. Promote me as a 12. I'll play as a 7. We'll win everything.
They'll be on to you, buddy. They're not stupid around here. Oh, God. Scott Ritter, good man, good friend. Thanks, dude. I really enjoyed the conversation. We'll catch you next time.